In December 1983, a person stepped into a quiet farmhouse in Walker, Iowa, only to find a horrifying scene. Despite an immediate investigation, the trail went cold for decades. Ronald Lee Novak was born on November 11, 1959, to Robert and Marguerite Novak in the southwest part of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The youngest of 7 siblings, Ronald grew up surrounded by a large family in a working-class environment. He attended Jefferson High School and graduated in 1978. As the years passed, Ronald remained close to his roots. By the early 1980s, he had settled in a rural area near the small town of Walker, just outside Center Point, Iowa. There, he found work in construction and mechanical repair, relying on his hands and practical skills to make a living. The peaceful countryside offered him the solitude he appreciated, and he led a relatively low-profile life. Despite his preference for privacy, Ronald maintained close ties with his family and a tight circle of friends. By December 23, 1983, Ronald was anticipating the holidays. It was the eve of Christmas Eve, and he looked forward to celebrating with his loved ones. At 24 years old, he had plans to spend time with his family and his girlfriend. His girlfriend and his best friend, Dale Lever, were expected to visit him later that evening. On the morning of December 24th, life came to a shocking and violent end. A friend arrived at Ronald's home only to discover a gruesome scene. Ronald was found dead in an unheated room of the house, the victim of what appeared to be a robbery or burglary gone horribly wrong. His hands were bound behind his back, and his body showed signs of brutal trauma. He had been beaten repeatedly with 2 hammers and a golf club. Both weapons were still lying near his body, and he had been shot once in the upper right arm with a .22 caliber handgun. The brutality of the crime was jarring, but perhaps even more heartbreaking was the sight of Ronald's 3 loyal dogs. They huddled around his lifeless body in the frigid room, visibly shivering as they tried to offer him warmth, refusing to leave his side. The friend, shaken by what he saw, wasted no time and quickly alerted the local authorities. When the police officers arrived at the scene, they immediately recognized the magnitude of the violence that had taken place. An investigation was promptly launched. As the detectives surveyed the scene, they noted the signs of a fierce struggle. Blood was splattered throughout the room, indicating that Ronald had fought back. Nearby, his cordless telephone lay discarded near the golf club and hammers, as if he had attempted to call for help but was overpowered. His wallet was missing, a detail that pointed to theft as a motive. According to Ronald's brother, Don Novak, Ronald typically carried several $100s in cash, money that was gone. The police also noticed a broken window in the kitchen door, suggesting that at least one of the attackers had tried to force entry there. Interestingly, that door remained locked, and Ronald's loaded shotgun, usually kept near the entrance, had not been used. This detail raised further questions about how the intruders had gained access, and why Ronald, who was usually cautious, had not reached for his weapon. The investigators would later uncover even more troubling elements inside the home. In Ronald's bedroom, officers found a small suitcase containing $32,000 in cash and nearby a green duffel bag with $7,650 worth of marijuana. These discoveries introduced new dimensions to the case, suggesting possible motives beyond simple robbery. Still, with strong winds sweeping across the property, any trace evidence, especially footprints left by the criminals, was quickly erased. No fingerprints were recovered, and local neighbors reported they had neither seen nor heard anything unusual that night. The autopsy report confirmed the savagery of the attack. Ronald had lost his life from a combination of blunt force trauma, a gunshot wound, and exposure to the freezing temperatures. In the days that followed, the detectives questioned Ronald's known acquaintances and compiled a list of what they described as good suspects. Yet, despite the number of people interviewed and leads followed, law enforcement lacked the physical evidence necessary to make an arrest. The case would soon grow cold. Decades later, renewed efforts by the investigators led to significant progress in Ronald Novak's long unsolved case. Technological advances in DNA analysis allowed the authorities to re-examine key evidence collected at the crime scene in 1983. Specifically, preserved blood samples and one of the hammers used in the attack were submitted for modern forensic testing. By May 2025, a critical breakthrough emerged. A DNA match was made to 64-year-old Michael Shepard of Fairview, Oregon. The identification of Shepard was made possible through a combination of conventional laboratory testing and genealogical DNA techniques. Blood and touch trace DNA were discovered on Ronald's clothing, and one of the hammers believed to have been used in the fatal beating. These materials had been carefully preserved for more than 4 decades. DNA Labs International conducted the initial forensic testing, while Paraben Nanolabs provided genetic genealogy information that ultimately led the investigators to Shepard as a key suspect in the case. According to the investigators, evidence indicates that Shepard was not acting alone. The investigation suggests that Shepard, along with other unidentified individuals, likely went to Ronald's rural home with the intent to rob him of cash and marijuana. The large amount of money and drugs found at the scene in 1983 supports this theory. What was intended as a robbery quickly escalated into a brutal and fatal attack, leaving Ronald bound, beaten, shot, and left to die in freezing conditions. In May 2025, Shepard was arrested in Oregon by a joint effort of federal and local law enforcement. He was formally charged in the first degree and is pending extradition to Lynn County, Iowa. He remains incarcerated at the Multnomah County Detention Center in Portland, while the authorities prepare for his transfer. For Ronald's surviving family members, the news of an arrest has stirred both relief and grief. His sisters, who have endured decades without answers, expressed their deep emotional response to the development. One of them said the following, reflecting on the long years of uncertainty and pain: "It takes strength to endure such hardship." While Shepard awaits trial, the investigators continue to pursue leads related to the other individuals believed to have been involved. For Ronald's family, the hope is that full accountability will follow, and that the silence surrounding his death will finally be broken. In February 1977, a young mother was found lifeless in the backseat of her own Volkswagen Beetle, parked at an unfamiliar apartment complex in San Jose, California. For 48 years, the case remained cold. Jeannette Ralston lived a quiet life marked by hard work and dedication to her young son. In her early 20s, she relocated to the Bay Area, determined to create a more stable and promising future for her family. At just 24 years old, she was focused on rebuilding her life and providing for her child. Everything changed on February 1, 1977. Jeannette was found lifeless in her Volkswagen Beetle, parked at an apartment complex where she had no known ties. The vehicle was located only minutes away from a bar she had visited with friends the previous night. Her body had been crammed into the tight space behind the front seats, suggesting an effort to conceal her. The authorities later confirmed that Jeannette had been inappropriately assaulted and strangled with a piece of her own clothing, specifically the sleeve of her shirt. The person responsible had also tried to burn the vehicle, possibly in an attempt to destroy evidence, but the fire never took. These disturbing details pointed to a violent and calculated act. Yet, the investigation quickly stalled due to a lack of immediate leads. Witnesses from the bar recalled that Jeannette left with an unknown man, assuring her friends she would return shortly. Her final words, "back in 10 minutes," were the last anyone heard from her. The investigators were given a description of the man, which was later turned into a composite sketch, but no one came forward to identify him. A carton of Eve cigarettes was retrieved from the vehicle, among other items. Yet, the limited forensic tools of the time hindered deeper analysis. Despite the evidence gathered early on, the case eventually went cold. Nearly 5 decades passed without answers. The investigators from the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Cold Case Unit, working alongside the San Jose Police Department, took another look at the evidence from the 1977 crime scene. This time, they applied modern forensic methods that had not been available during the initial investigation. Their re-examination led to a breakthrough. A fingerprint on the pack of Eve cigarettes was reanalyzed and stood out as a potential lead. In August 2024, the fingerprint was matched to Willie Eugene Sims, a 69-year-old man living in Ohio. Back in 1977, Sims had been a 21-year-old private in the United States Army, stationed at Fort Ord in Monterey County, placing him in California at the time of the crime. The investigators traveled to Ohio to obtain a DNA sample directly from Sims that, along with other existing pieces of evidence, began to form a solid case. DNA found under Jeannette's fingernails and on the shirt sleeve used to strangle her, along with the original sketch provided by her friends decades earlier, helped confirm the connection. Additional records revealed that Sims had a violent criminal history. In 1978, just a year after Jeannette's death, He was convicted in Monterey County for assault with intent to kill someone and was sentenced to 4 years in state prison. Despite that conviction, he managed to avoid further legal trouble in the years that followed. After serving his time, he moved out of California long before the implementation of CODIS, the National DNA Database, so his DNA had never been added to the system. In May 2025, once the fingerprint match was confirmed and supported by DNA evidence, Sims was arrested in Jefferson, Ohio, and formally charged. If convicted, he faces a maximum sentence of 25 years to life in prison. After 48 long years, Jeannette's family finally received the news they had been waiting for. Her son, Ronald Ralston, who was only 6 years old when his mother lost her life, expressed deep gratitude to the cold case investigators and law enforcement officials who never gave up. He shared that the arrest brought a sense of closure that had been missing for decades, offering his family long overdue peace after so many years spent living without answers. He said, "I mean, what a great Mother's Day gift and birthday present rolled into one." He was only days away from his 55th birthday. "You know, my whole life, I've never understood what Mother's Day even means." In the fall of 1997, skeletal remains were found near 43rd Street and 7th Avenue in Tampa, Florida. For more than 28 years, the identity of the man remained a mystery. Alongside the remains, the investigators found a valid resident alien card and social security card, offering a glimmer of hope in identifying the individual. However, that hope quickly faded as attempts to trace relatives or verify the documents hit a dead end. The cause of death remained unknown, and with no clear direction, the investigation stalled. Even the involvement of the Mexican consulate in November 1997 yielded no helpful information. At the time, the authorities struggled to determine whether the man's death had been natural, accidental, if he ended his own life, or if it was the result of foul play. For more than 28 years, the skeletal remains remained nameless. Despite periodic reviews, no new evidence surfaced, but recent advancements in forensic science have sparked renewed interest in forgotten cases like this one. The Hillsborough County Medical Examiner's Office, once limited by the technology of the 1990s, has embraced the growing field of DNA analysis and forensic genealogy. In early 2024, the Hillsborough County Medical Examiner's Office took a decisive step forward by reopening the decades-old case. This renewed effort came through a collaborative initiative with U.S. Customs and Border Protection's Missing Migrants Program and the Mexican Consulate. Rather than relying on forensic genealogy, the investigators employed routine DNA testing to pursue any potential familial connections. Their efforts paid off when they located a woman in Guanajuato, Mexico, who turned out to be the sister of the unidentified man. A cheek swab collected from her in August 2024 provided a long-awaited DNA match to the skeletal remains discovered in Tampa nearly 30 years earlier. In May 2025, with that DNA match, the authorities were able to confirm the identity of the deceased as Rodolfo Barcenas Guerrero. This breakthrough ended years of uncertainty, finally putting a name to the man whose remains had languished in anonymity since 1997. The Mexican consulate quickly stepped in to facilitate the next steps, working to ensure that Rodolfo's cremated remains would be returned to his family. Despite confirming his identity, the precise circumstances of his death remain unsolved. The cause and manner of death, originally deemed undetermined in 1997, still elude investigators today. Whether Rodolfo lost his life as a result of natural causes, an accident, or under more suspicious circumstances is something that remains a mystery. In March 1981, a 20-year-old woman vanished in the Las Vegas area. The case would take decades to be solved. Vicki Radig was born in 1961 and spent her childhood in Boulder City, Nevada, not far from the bright lights of Las Vegas. Vicki attended Boulder City High School, where she built lasting connections and quietly moved through her school years with grace. She graduated in 1977. By early 1981, Vicki was 20 years old and had settled into life in the Las Vegas area. She found local employment. At this point in her life, Vicki was in a relationship with Walter Bradley Dement. Details about the dynamics of their relationship remain limited, but it is clear that they spent time together and were romantically involved. In March 1981, Vicki was reported missing by her family. Concern quickly mounted when it became clear that Vicki had not returned home after going out with her boyfriend, Walter. Her family informed the police that she had last been seen with Walter, prompting the investigators to focus their early efforts on tracing her movements that day. The authorities invited him in for questioning shortly after the report was filed. During the interview, he claimed that the two had gotten into an argument and that Vicki had run off afterward. This explanation immediately raised concerns, but with no immediate evidence to contradict his story, the police had to proceed cautiously. Just 2 days after she was reported missing, Vicki's body was discovered in a remote desert area along Boulder Highway. The grim discovery confirmed her family's worst fears. The police quickly ruled that her life was ended after determining that she had suffered both blunt and sharp force trauma. Walter was named a person of interest early in the investigation. His story raised red flags with the detectives, particularly due to several inconsistencies in his account of the events leading up to Vicki's disappearance. Despite this, the investigators struggled to find physical evidence or witness testimony strong enough to formally charge him. The Henderson Police Department continued to investigate, but revealed little about the direction of their inquiries. They did not confirm whether any other suspects had been identified or seriously considered during the course of the case. With limited leads and no new breakthroughs, momentum slowly faded. Eventually, the case went cold. In 2021, 4 decades after the initial investigation into Vicki's case, new developments began to emerge. DNA swabs taken from her during the original autopsy were re-examined using modern forensic techniques. The testing revealed a match. Walter Bradley Dement had contributed DNA found on the samples. This discovery marked a pivotal breakthrough in the long-dormant case. The momentum continued into 2022 and 2023 as the investigators submitted additional evidence from the original case for further forensic analysis. This second round of testing reinforced the initial findings, uncovering more DNA linked to both Dement and Vicki. With these results, the investigators were able to strengthen the narrative that had long pointed to Dement, but until then lacked the physical proof to support prosecution. Armed with this new evidence, the Henderson Police Department presented their findings to the Clark County District Attorney's Office. In April 2025, after reviewing the forensic results and the history of the investigation, the DA's office agreed with the police conclusions. Dement was the only viable suspect ever identified in the case. The previously inconclusive suspicions had finally been backed by definitive scientific evidence. However, a crucial detail changed the course of what could have been a renewed legal process. The investigators learned that Dement had passed away in 2007. His death effectively closed the door on any possibility of prosecution. Despite this, law enforcement did not view the case as without purpose. The Henderson Police Department notified Vicki's surviving family members of the recent findings. In August 1987, a husband returned to his quiet home in Hyempom, Northern California, to find his wife mysteriously missing. An anonymous package containing some of her skeletal remains were received, but decades would pass before this case was solved. In February 1993, a man walking along the beach at Trinidad Head on the California coast came across a human skull. At the time, the authorities were unable to identify the remains. A DNA profile was developed from the skull, but when checked against the combined DNA index system, no match was found and the case went cold. Decades later, in May 2025, thanks to advances in DNA technology and the efforts of Othrem DNA analysts, the identity of the skull was finally confirmed. It belonged to Kay Josephine Medin. Kay Adams, also known as Kay Medin, was born in 1939. Kay was a dedicated elementary school teacher who lived in Hyempom in Trinity County, Northern California. She worked at the Hyempom school and shared her life with her husband, Nicholas Medin. They were blessed with a daughter. The daughter's DNA was used in the identification. On August 3, 1987, Nicholas returned to his home after a business trip only to discover that his wife Kay was missing. Upon entering their residence, he immediately noticed something was wrong. Kay's purse, glasses, and car were all still at the house, items she would not have left behind if she had gone anywhere voluntarily. Deeply alarmed, Nicholas contacted the authorities to report his 48-year-old wife as missing. He explained to law enforcement that he had been away and came home to an unsettling silence and no sign of Kay. The Trinity County Sheriff's Office responded swiftly, launching a search of the Medin property and the surrounding woods in the remote Hyampam area. Despite their efforts, no evidence of Kay's whereabouts was uncovered. As the investigation officially began, law enforcement focused on gathering as much information as possible. Friends, neighbors, and family members were interviewed to piece together Kay's last known movements. However, these conversations yielded no significant leads. Nothing in her behavior suggested that anything was amiss. Her sudden disappearance puzzled those closest to her. The absence of any signs of struggle or forced entry only deepened the mystery. As word of Kay's disappearance spread, the community rallied to support the search. Volunteers combed the rugged terrain surrounding the Medin home, navigating the dense forests and steep slopes of the Trinity Mountains. Despite the challenging environment and their best efforts, no trace of Kay was found. Each day that passed without answers only added to the growing sense of unease. Several months after Kay's disappearance in November of 1987, the investigation took a grim turn. The sheriff's department in neighboring Humboldt County received a chilling package from an anonymous sender. Inside the package was a disturbing combination: an anonymous letter and some of Kay Adams's skeletal remains. The letter provided specific details directing the investigators to the location of additional remains. Following the instructions in the letter, law enforcement officers traveled to a remote area near a road about 45 miles from Kay's home. There they discovered more skeletal remains believed to be connected to the missing teacher. These findings offered the first concrete physical evidence since Kay had vanished months earlier. Forensic experts confirmed the identity of the remains through dental records, putting an end to any uncertainty about who they belonged to. Despite this breakthrough, the cause of Kay's death remained a mystery. The condition of the remains made it impossible for the investigators to determine how she had lost her life or what circumstances had led to her tragic fate. The discovery of Kay's remains did not lead to any arrests, and the case eventually went cold. In 1988, a death certificate was officially issued for Kay. This legal step acknowledged her death despite the fact that she was still legally classified as a missing person. Finally, in 2025, the skull found in 1993 was identified. Authorities from the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office acknowledged the baffling nature of the case. They expressed uncertainty about how the majority of Kay's remains ended up 45 miles from her home, while her skull was found nearly 100 miles away on the coast. Nicholas, Kay's husband, passed away in 2018. Throughout the investigation, the police have stated that they do not consider him a suspect in her death. The police have appealed to the public for any information that could shed light on Kay's disappearance and death. They hope that someone somewhere might hold a crucial piece of information that can finally help solve the case.